My name is Kara Boozer. I'm a youth development educator serving Bond, Clinton, Jefferson, Marion, and Washington counties.
Hi, my name is Chris Looking. I'm the horticulture educator serving those additional same counties, and we're here tonight to talk to you and answer some questions. The program tonight will last about an hour long, so we have plenty of time to answer questions as you bring them to us.
So welcome parents and youth, and thank you again for joining us, and hopefully you guys have some questions with us about your project. So I want to encourage you, if you're new 4-H members, to not stress and to not panic about this. First off, you do have a Showbook, and that's your manual to help guide you. It's a good starting place. I do know sometimes we have additional questions that maybe we feel that the Showbook does not answer, and that's where you need to reach out to your program coordinators, your club leaders, and other people in 4-H that you know that could offer you some additional help. So those of you who have done it before, if you have some new ideas or want to try something new and have additional questions, please reach out to your 4-H staff, and we can definitely work to get those answered for you.
And some of the other things we wanted to kind of bring up tonight is we know that there's first-time members, we know there's clover buds, that they have lots of questions. So one item that I would probably recommend, if you haven't done it already or you're a first time going to show, that you definitely take and mock up someone to present to. So you know you're going to go in front of a judge and they're going to ask you a few questions. So maybe ask a neighbor or an aunt or an uncle to sit down at a desk or a table, and you bring your project to them and have them ask you a few questions about your project. Talk to them about it, explain your project, and that's kind of what our judges are going to do as you present to them. So it's just kind of giving you a little reassurance and talking to someone that you normally might not talk to, just to kind of explain your project. We know you've done a lot of work on it and you're excited about showing it, so just take a few minutes and really learn from that.
So how do you prepare for this project? Where do you get started? I think that's the hardest place for any youth to get started. And so most of our general projects do start with that poster-based project, right? That trifold board that you can pick up at your local store. And that's a good place to start with pictures, ideally pictures that you've taken yourself or you have some ownership of, information, things that you've learned. Basically, that poster needs to reflect what you want to tell that judge. What did you learn about that project, right? So we want to start with there. A lot of times it can be posters, but you can get creative and have items included in your project, or a tablecloth, part of your display. You can get really creative and add things. Now, specifically, like we said earlier, back to that Showbook, it will specifically tell you like the size of poster board or that trifold board that you need. It will tell you specific things that you need to include in that project. But there is room for creativity to add things that you want to add. You can use stickers, you can print things off, you could paint, you can write, use whatever avenue you're comfortable with. That's kind of a good starting place for you. Some projects are not poster projects, right? Chris is going to talk to us tonight about some of our vegetable or our floricultures, and that's bringing in a very specific item, something that we've grown, something that we've raised, and we'll get more specific with that later and what those criteria look like.
Yeah, so we know that sometimes that they're going to ask for things. Sometimes even our cooking projects, we want to think about, they're going to ask for it to be on a plate, covered with saran wrap and with a recipe about that item. Either it might be the recipe of actual item, or it might be a menu where you include that item in a recipe as far as your menu. So really look at each of your project areas and see what is the criteria, and that'll kind of help you guide you. And now, not everything is there, and so if there is a question, even after reading that section about that project, reach out to your 4-H staff, reach out to someone in that area, and they'll be able to help you kind of navigate through that. We know that it's challenging sometimes, and we just want to, this is why we're here tonight, we just want to make sure that we're trying to clear up some of those questions that you have.
Most importantly, we've said it again, is you've got to read the Showbook. That's just your starting place. It may not answer all of your questions, but it's a great place for you to just get started. Sometimes the Showbook doesn't have enough information, right? And we worry about that. So there are additional sources, like Chris said. That's when you're going to reach out to your staff. That's when you're going to reach out to your club leaders, things like that. I always recommend sometimes going to the internet. You guys have a lot of resources today. Sometimes it's watching a YouTube video of someone doing something and you want to do something similar for your 4-H project. That's a great reference point. But sometimes it's, personally, I'm a fan of Pinterest. Pinterest gives us ideas. We want to be sure that we're not copying ideas or doing something exactly that someone else has done, but we can get inspiration from ideas from other people or things that we have seen done based on what our interests are, right? The Showbook is not, I don't want it to narrow down your ideas, but I want it to be a good reference for you so that you can get additional help and make sure that you at least hit that minimum criteria in order to have that project. So we're talking about the Showbook and criteria, but there's also some score sheets that are an invaluable resource for you. They're actually on the 4-H website that you can check out, and it's going to tell you what those judges are going to be looking at very specifically. Have you done these things? And they're available to you guys, and I encourage you to look at those and make sure that you're checking those boxes. It will help you before you go into that judging.
Yeah, and along with that, why I guess Carrie and I kind of reached out to each other. We've both been in that same arena as you guys. Yeah. We were 4-H members. We showed at fairs. We had general projects. We had horticulture projects. We had livestock projects. So you have, we've had that knowledge base basically from performing that and being in your shoes right now. I have children that have showed at 4-H, and so really it's what area are you going into? Really look at that, because we know that you're going to have an entry level, a beginning stage. You have different ones. So you have floriculture, you have A, you have floriculture B. So you can expand your project. If you did a beginning project last year, it may be that this is now your second year of 4-H and you want to do an additional one. So you're going to that level B or level C, where you can do a display project, or you're going to do a little bit more intricate project. So we definitely want you to be thinking about, where am I going with my project and what's the goal? Do I want to continue with this? Do I want to learn more? And that's really what it is expanding your knowledge and really increasing everything and having fun with it.
And that judging is not, they're not going to call you out and say you did something wrong. They're just going to check for understanding. You're teaching them. Basically, when you go into that one-on-one judging, we use the term judging, but it's almost like you're educating them on your project. What did you learn? You're the expert in this situation, right? They'll have some familiarity and they will know about your project, but they just want to see what you know and what you learned. And your poster and your project is your opportunity to tell them your story and to convey your message.
And the other thing we want to think about is if we're going into a certain area. So floriculture is one that I enjoy seeing and growing all season. So floriculture, when you start out, you can either start out with your first learning of the first, I think floriculture A is what it is. And I flip my page here. Floriculture A. So the first item you could do is either create a round arrangement. So all the flowers are completely all the way around it. And you're going to have it in a vase. And you're going to be able to view it, so you want it to be very symmetrical and have its spaced correctly, like if you use multiples. The other thing is you could, if you don't have enough flowers, say I only had a few in bloom, what you can do is you could do the bud vase. And what you want to do is 3 of the same size, 3 of the same variety too, right? So if we have zinnias, for instance, they're round. We want them to be basically fully mature, and we want them to be the same color, and we want to have that same visual appeal to them, right? So we don't want one that's great big and one that's real tiny in there, unless that's all you have. But we truly want them to look very uniform, and that will be your way to succeed in that project, is that you follow the guidelines and reading through it. And that's one of the guidelines, is to make sure you're completing either or. You don't have to do both. Yes. You have to do either or and make a choice on that.
So also in Floriculture A, Another project idea that's listed in your manual or in your show book is you can have a photo collage or a collection of pictures of flowers. So maybe you happen to take some pictures that spring, but like by the time your show came around, you didn't have those flowers any longer, right? Or they got mowed or something like that, right? We're in a drought right now.
Yeah.
Flowers, it's hard on them to maybe make it to your fair, and that's okay. Do that collage project. You have to label your flowers and name them, and you can start with the seed or the cutting or transplants. There are other opportunities that aren't maybe that round arrangement or that bud vase. So there are options, and that's what's really important to remember is that you have options.
Yeah, and if you've done that the first time and you're like, I want to do more, you can move on and you could do a more advanced theme type of your arrangement, or you could do another display. So this is about you taking it to the next level. I learned this, I'm expanding and I'm learning something new, and that's okay too. And so one of the questions that we have from the comments, what do we do when our seeds aren't coming up? We know the garden, that's going to be what we'll talk about next, is some of the horticulture things. What happens if our squash or our beans got flooded or they're not coming up? So what we want to do is we got to think about that. If we're not sure because of the weather, what we might want to start doing is taking those pictures so we can take and make a poster of it. We know that we can't go to farmer's market and purchase those items. They need to be something that we grew. So we want to really think about that. If it doesn't come in, maybe start taking pictures now along, and at least you can explain what your project is that you're working towards. Maybe it didn't work out, but we definitely want to think about that. And then our vegetable plate, we kind of talked about that. What happens to our vegetable plates? We know on our vegetable plates, we want to have the plate, and we're going to have, in our show book, we're going to have a list of specific items we have. So if we're going to have slicing tomatoes, we know we need 5 slicing tomatoes. We don't want to have 6, and we don't want to have 4. It specifically says we need 5, right? So we want to think about that. We want them to be uniform. If we're going to cut and have all of the stems off of them and cut short stemmed, that's okay, but we want to make sure we do that for all of them. We don't want to break one off and then have 3 stems and 2 of them broken off. We want to make sure that we're cleaning them all up, that they're very clean, they're set the same way, and that they're very uniform if possible. Now, if we're going to do our smaller cherry tomatoes, that's more. We need to have 12 of those. So just really looking at the criteria is going to make a difference. And that's going to score you better if you do that.
So as Chris mentioned on vegetable plates, if you go to page 45 in your show book, it has the specific vegetable plate and display list. Like Chris says, it tells you, for example, an asparagus, 5 spears, right? We really want to follow that and honor that, because that's what's going to make your project most successful. So when you're selecting for that project and you're out harvesting in your garden, you need to look for those things and make sure you're picking the 5 best, or 6 or 4 or 3, whatever that number is, right? So make sure that you go to page 45 of the show book, and that will tell you specifically what those items are that you need to bring. And on page 45 as well, and page 44 too, it tells you about the plate that she mentioned, what kind of a plate that you should use, and you should have 1 variety per plate, and how you cannot show 2 plates of the same type of vegetables. So things like that you have questions about, they are in that on page 45 as well.
And we also want to think about when we're picking. We know if the show is that day, we don't want to pick 3 days before if we don't have to, right? It might seem like we want to get everything done, but we want to think about, we want everything to be as fresh as possible and in prime condition. We want to wash that product. So if, say, it's kind of a little bit dirty underneath and it has some soil on it, we want to make sure that it's clean, it's had time to dry. We don't want it soapy and wet coming into the fair. We want to make sure that everything is as best displayed as possible, because that's what's really going to be highlighted in when you present it. We want it to be very eye appealing, uniformity. We want to make sure, we know that there's misshaped items, and sometimes that's what we have, and that's fine. But we also want to think about, how can I set it up to be the best display possible and look the best? So that's really just giving you those key things. You know, you don't want them to come in and have something that's, you know, maybe crooked and on the corner that you could have corrected before then.
do you want to talk about floriculture and parts of a flower?
Sure. So some of the parts of the flower, so we want to think about on our floriculture display, it will say 3 stems. So we want to think about our, when we're cutting our stems, we want to make sure that we have a length of stem to it, and then we have our floret and our flowers that are at the top, our inflorescence. And I'm going to give an example. Lilies are a little challenging to some of them when you're displaying. We have a stem, but we might have petioles that are coming up and they're branching. So we want to think about if we're taking that whole stem off, even though it has maybe branches off of it, the 3 branches, that's not considered a stem. That's branches off of the main stem. So if we have lilies, for an example, we want to have 3 sets of stems. They have multiple flowers on them, but we're going to have 3 full stems. So really think about what flower am I going to display or I'm going to take for my entry. Sunflowers are very simple, right? Like a zinnia or a sunflower has a stem and it has 1 flower head, but some of them are branching in multiples. So we want to make sure that you're getting multiples stems. You're going to have that 1 main trunk stem that's going to go in there, and that's kind of confusing sometimes. It's just if it's your first time. So.
Yeah, we've run into that one a lot before, and it can be confusing. Chris, can I use fake flowers in my arranging?
No, we can't, right? So we're not going to do that. We're going to use our fresh flowers. So that's what we're talking about. It's a learning experience because we're growing our flowers. So different times of year, it's hard. We may not have something in bloom that we want. And it's okay to use, but we want to use 1 variety. So we're thinking about if we have black-eyed Susans or we have purple coneflowers, they're the same varieties. We can't put 3 stems of something. We want it to be all the same one. Now, if we're doing a theme arrangement and we're doing, say, patriotic, we could do multiple colors. We could do reds and yellows and whites together. But we want to make sure that we're using that as a theme arrangement, not as a certain topic on 1 class. So it's really specific. Look at your show book and kind of ask those questions. And if you have questions, that's why we're here. We can help you with that.
So that's an example of floriculture. We also, we want to talk tonight about animal shows for a little bit. We both have some experience with animal shows. And what do you need to bring with you? If it's your first time, you may not know. If you've been here for a while, you may know what you want to bring and what you don't want to bring. So it's always important to make sure we have the proper tack. We have the halters that we need if we have show sticks, or we have whips, or we have pipes. We have different things that we need. Obviously, your animal needs food, something to have water in, any type of grooming equipment you might need, soap or a hose to wash your animal, little things like that we don't always think of. We want to make sure that we have all of the things that we're going to need. We get kind of spoiled at home. We know we have everything at home, but we're going to move to another location for a couple days, so we want to make sure that we have everything that our animal would possibly need there. If it's hot, you're going to want a fan. Our animals will need fans. In fair, typically the 4-H shows are typically very hot.
Bedding is
during
another
the summertime.
one.
Yes, bedding. And there are specific types of bedding for your animals that you'll need, and all of that information can be found in your show book, specifically under those. In the beginning of your show book, there's some county-specific pages. So for each of your counties, they have some different rules on that. You want to make sure you're familiar with that, whether they allow straw or they don't, or shaving. So you want to make sure you're familiar, and that's county by county, and that's in those front pages. So pages like 3, 4, 5, all the way to 12 that has your specific county rules that might have some specific animal questions to answer that on what you may or may not need at the show. So something to check out are your county specific pages.
And the other thing we want to think about is we don't want to wait to get our health papers. We want to make sure we have our health papers all taken care of, and they need to be with you as you check in at the fair. We want to make sure you have your health papers, if it's a goat or sheep project, your scrapie tags in, hogs the same way, your swine projects, make sure all your tags, everything is identifiable and each of your species. Make sure you have everything ready for you, because at check-in, that's a big thing. The vets will come around and they want to see the child with the health paper, and they want to be able to stamp it. So they're going to look at that as a requirement, and just make sure everything is there. So if you forgot it at home, then that means someone's going to have to make an extra trip and run and get it, right? We know that because we've had that happen.
Before, yes.
Did you not grab that off the counter? So make sure you're grabbing items that you're going to need to take with you, especially for weigh-in. We want to make sure you have your list. We double check at weigh-in what classes you're going to be in case there's something that's been missed, and we want to make sure we take care of that as soon as possible, as far as we're going to scratch this entry because they didn't make fair. There might have been an issue there, has happened, whatever the issue is. If it might have been too light a weight, it just didn't fill out the way it came in sick. It's going to have a baby too soon. We didn't think it was going to have it until after fair, and all of a sudden now it's going to have a baby this week at fair. There's different reasons why you might have a scratch, and that's okay to scratch it before the fair. Just let your superintendent know that. And that way we can kind of keep that list. So we're not waiting for you to enter a class that you no longer have an animal that's written in that class.
So for those of you who are new, Chris used a term that said scratch, which basically means we're going to not show in a class. And that can happen at general projects, or that can happen with your livestock projects. Sometimes things happen and our projects don't make it, and that's okay. Or maybe we didn't have enough time to finish all of the projects that we wanted to do for that general show. That's okay. Just be sure to communicate when you go to register, or to even let your program coordinator know before the show, a day or two, if you know it's coming, that you didn't complete that project. And that's okay. Scratch that project. Things happen, and we know that. The projects don't always make it to the fair. We're hopeful that they will, but we understand too that things happen. So it's important to communicate that with your 4-H staff.
And cooking projects is really one of those that you can have any kind of dilemma happen that with your cooking thing. The biscuits didn't rise like you wanted them to, or the pie crust got too dark, right? We got a little hot because it was preheating and it got too warm. There's lots of different issues that occur, and we know things happen, so it's okay to do that. We definitely you need to communicate to staff so we know what's going on with it.
Absolutely. Chris, you want to talk about peppers in your garden?
Sure. So on our peppers, when we harvest our pepper, we know that we're going to pull it upright and it's going to break the stem piece off. They come off in multiple different sizes because depending on the length of them, the size of your pepper. So what we like to do is to be very uniform. We like to make a straight cut across and have just a short piece of stem. And that way it's just uniformity. It's looking nice. When you have potatoes that you're going to go ahead and harvest, you want to make sure that you wash the soil off of them. Just those little things that you can do that will help. Some of our crop projects, we hadn't talked about crop show.
No, we didn't.
But a crop show is a very important one when you show your soybeans or your corn projects. Sunflowers. You need to make sure that all of the roots have been washed, all the soil is washed off of those. And that allows for exposure of those roots. And that's one thing to see how the judge is going to be scoring it, not only from the height, but they also want to see how the roots have gone. Have they gotten deep into the soil structure? Are they really shallow? Was there some that they're being watered and there was a water issue? There's a drought, right? So they had to either go down really deep to find water, or they were being irrigated and it's really shallow roots, right? So all of that's part of the crop show that we need to think about, and that's a big important thing. I've seen them come and not have the roots washed off, and they get points deducted because they haven't done that one little step.
And that's really important. There's a lot of those little steps in this show book, in those projects, that you just need to make sure that you've done. It is very specific, but it is there to help you. And we want you guys to get the most points that you can, because you guys have worked so hard on your projects, and we know that. And this is your time to shine and your time to do, to tell what you learned and what you know.
So a big key is to make sure we have our show books with us. That's what we're referencing tonight, right? So we know that. But you're going to have in the front of your show book, you're going to have a table of contents. But the main thing is you're going to have all of those show schedules right there to make sure that you're prepared. Make sure you're going through. You have deadlines. They're listed. And along with that, you're going to have your show schedule. So you want to make sure you're there for your show if you've done all the hard work.
Absolutely.
So make sure you're looking at that. And every county, so it gives it, this is our unit book So Bond County starts off our first section. Then we go to Clinton County. Your schedule's here. And then any of this information on your livestock, your general projects, your master showmanship, which that's one thing we haven't talked about yet, is listed there. So really looking at those items.
Your superintendents are listed in here, so those are the people that Chris mentioned. If you have questions or you need to talk to somebody, they're your point of contact that you're going to go to and ask those questions, because especially once we get to 4-H shows, the program coordinator may not always be available, right? Or we cannot find them. I'm usually there working, and other staff is there working, but you can't always find us. So that's what those superintendents' job is. But that schedule is really important. You need to make sure, too, you're reading your newsletter. If you'll notice in the schedule, it doesn't have locations for all of your sites yet. Probably at the time we made the schedule, we didn't have the location secured. So that's being announced either on your county's Facebook page. It's in the newsletter. If you have specific questions about that, reach out to your county staff. But we were putting that information out there every day to make sure you guys know where everything is and that you're going to be there. That's so important to us. So make sure that you're checking those different things as much as possible. So that information is there.
The other big thing with master showmanship, we'll kind of highlight that, is you may not have all the animals that you need that you're bringing to do the master showmanship competition. So you may have brought, say for instance, a beef project that you're planning on showing. So you're going to have to contact a fellow 4-H member to see if you can borrow maybe a swine or a sheep to utilize to complete that challenge of being master showman and be able to participate. Think about that. Who has projects there that you can talk to in the beginning of the fair? Don't wait until 2 minutes before Master Showman and go, oh, I thought you'd have an animal ready. If it's your first year, make sure that you're contacting fellow 4-Hers, seeing their projects, ask them, politely, may I use your animal? And they may be able to, loan you an animal. They may have already made another contact and they're not able to do that. So you definitely think about reaching out to them beforehand. Will you have something available for me? And then making sure you're having that contact, because we don't want to wait until last minute to do that, because then we might be disappointed that we are not able to do that because of that.
So master showmanship is new in some of your counties, right? So you may not have seen this contest before, and some of your counties have had them. So in the master showmanship contest, you have to show a cow, a pig, and a sheep. And we know that we are not always all experts in those species, right? So we have to sometimes call on our friends to loan us an animal, but also to teach us a little bit about that animal. So if you compete in the contest, we have a judge who comes in who's different from the other show judges that you've already seen, and they're just going to judge showmanship. They're going to judge your knowledge. What do you know? So you may not be an expert in all of them, but you want to try to know as much information as possible to try to do your best. And if you win your county show, you have the opportunity to then go on and compete at state. So to qualify for the state contest, though, you do have to win your local county show. So there is specific information in those front few pages, like I said, pages 3 to 12, that have that specific information about your master showmanship contest at your county fair. If you're new or if your county's never offered one before this year, that's all right there for you. So be sure you're reading that before you get to fair. You don't want to miss the opportunity to compete in master showmanship if that's what you want to do. It's a lot of fun. I competed and I went to state when I was a kid, so I really recommend it if it's something you're interested in to check out. So be sure you read those pages.
Another thing is we get lots of calls into the office and we try to field them. So one of our calls recently that we had into the office was about electricity. So you can go to the Showbook on page 34 and it's going to tell you a little more about that project. The great thing is they're having some electricity workshops that 4-H is going ahead and providing some workshops for
Yes.
maybe more knowledge on that, learning about the project a little more. And it may be that you haven't signed up this year for that workshop, but there'll be future workshops coming that you might be able to sign up. So if you want to continue in electricity, for instance, you can do an electricity workshop. But really, you need to go to page 34 of your Showbook, right? And it's going to talk about electricity 1 or electricity 2. And it says maybe battery powered, using battery components and wiring. And you're going, oh my gosh, what does that mean? Sometimes it gives you specific things, and sometimes you may have to research it or look at a project that uses that item, like electricity and the wiring, and say, how would I work with this? You know, I've seen on a YouTube, or I've done a research, and they've taken it, wiring and electricity, and they've had to make a light bulb light up or something. How can I do that? It may not tell us this. There may be it may be in a project manual, or it might be something that you have to kind of investigate. And that's where it's so fun to be creative. I've seen one where they've taken a watermelon and they put the electrodes in and made the light bulb light up. And I'm like, that's fun. Maybe we could do that. I don't know how to do that. So let's think about, you know, if I don't know, maybe it's attending a workshop. Maybe it's reaching out to ask some more questions. And maybe it's just having fun with it and saying, I'm going to experiment with this by reading my manual, and if it works, if not, maybe I need to call somebody that's had that project, or maybe I can find out some more information on it.
Absolutely. So like Chris said, in electricity on page 34, it says you need to exhibit either a momentary switch, a simple switch, a basic circuit, electromagnet, or electric motor, or galvanometer, right? It tells you specifically, but there's still creativity, like Chris said, with using the watermelon, with doing different things like that. So there are specific things that you need to do or include and demonstrate how it was constructed. All of that stuff is in there, but there is creativity to do it in a way that interests you. And there's different levels, just like with floriculture, there was A and B. With electricity, there's 2, 3, and there's 4. So based on your level of expertise, if you've done this for a while or if you're new, you need to explore those different levels to make sure it's where you need to be. So that's really important, okay? Chris mentioned a manual, having a project manual. A question we get a lot is, how do I get a project manual? So throughout the year, we have a link that the 4-H program coordinators have been using to order those manuals, and we order them for you. They get shipped to our office, and then we can get them to you. Some projects require that manual in order to be completed. Some of them are very basic, and they can get you started, but like Chris said, you've got to do some additional research on your own, or maybe find an expert in the area that can offer some more guidance as well. It depends on your level of expertise. Can you still get a project manual? Most likely. We have extras that we have here in the office that we can loan out. We can send you copies of. We'll email them to your family or to you. That can get you started. We still have some time to order them. We're still we're a few weeks out from some of our shows still, so we still have a little time, not a lot. Washington County is the first county up, and they're going to be starting on July 10th. Is their livestock show, so a few days before that's their general project show. So we're going to get started here quickly. So you need to be thinking about your project, and if you need resources, ideally we want to have our resources done and selected and ordered by May, but we do still have some time to get those in if you still have questions or need additional help.
And along with that, we know that your entries, what am I planning on doing? Those are due
Yes.
on June 15th, which is coming up this week, right? Oh my gosh, we're already into it. So we know we have a couple days, but we really need to make those entries. So if I know I'm going to do a cooking one, or I'm growing zucchini, they're growing, they may not be very big yet, but they're growing, but I have until July to get them ready. I need to go ahead and say, I'm going to do the vegetable plate, and I need to go ahead and make that entry. Like I said, we want to make sure that you're being proactive,
Yes.
that if you're working on that project, even if you're not completely finished with it, because we know things are growing, we still need to make our fair entry.
Yes.
We need to get that documentation done. If you need a manual, get with us as soon as possible, and that way we can get it ordered, or we can get copies of something that you may need. If it's a recipe that you're going to use for that, just that item, whatever else we have, we definitely want to make sure we do that.
So Chris mentioned entries. Now, fair entry is it's an online source where you need to go to make your fair entry. So you register for 4-H and Z Suites. And you selected your projects there. But now, like she said, you've got to indicate what projects you're going to take, and that's done through fair entry, okay? So it's a different site, it's a different login that your family will have to help you do. But it's important to let us know what projects you're going to bring, because like I said earlier, maybe we took a photography project, but we didn't do it this year. That's okay. Don't enter it on fair entry. But if we think we're going to bring that zucchini, even though we don't know that zucchini is going to make it to the fair, we're going to go ahead and make that entry in hopes that we're going to be able to show that project. So fair entry is important because it helps the program coordinators to plan. We have to make sure we have judges, we have enough judges, that we have enough time in order to make sure all of your projects get judged. It just helps with that planning process. So it's really important that you make those entries when you have an opportunity.
And then we want to just be available to you. So if you have any questions, anything that you have a concern about, a question about, feel free to reach out to us. That's what our job is to be here for you, to answer questions. It may be a little bit of a delay where we have to be out of the office, and we're going to be there within that afternoon. Program staff is here, so we're here to help you. It just may be that we can't immediately call you right back within the same hour. We know we're getting close to deadline time, so if you do have questions, don't wait to the last minute. Be thinking about, what do I need and how can we help you.
So this video is going to be posted on our Facebook page as well as YouTube. So if you weren't able to hop on with us live tonight, you can watch it later. But we really do appreciate those of you who were able to drop questions in the comments and ask us. But I think most of all, what we really want to convey is, get help. Don't forget to check out your Showbook first. Try to go here first for help, and then when we have additional questions, that's what we're here for. That's what 4-H staff is here for. We even have our horticulture staff that's able to help us with stuff, and we're able to answer your questions.
Yeah, and so we want to thank you guys for taking your time to watch us or to come to us and ask questions. We have a broad selection of things. We may have a natural resource topic, or we may have a horticulture topic. We may have a livestock topic. Just reach out to us as soon as possible, and we're able to help you as soon as we can.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.